Chapter 13. An Unexpected Kiss. She doesn't want to give up. Janran's unyielding character was immediately ignited. She raised her head and looked provocatively at Qin Yue. Who was afraid of who? The host said begin. The other three groups immediately took action. Everyone shouted from the side, Boss Qin, do your best. Boss Qin will win. Qin Yue said to Janran, don't move while biting the apple. Let me eat it. This was the tactic. Not both of them were going to eat the apple, but Janran was going to hold the apple, and Qin Yue was going to eat it. Janran nodded her head. But thinking about it was one thing. When it really happened, Janran's mouth had not touched the apple yet, but her sense of smell was disturbed by Qin Yue's clean and cool breath. Everyone's voices became louder. Boss Qin, do your best. Boss Qin will win. Don't panic, I'm here. Amidst the thunderous shouts of the crowd, Qin Yue's low and sexy voice still reached Janran's ears. Janran quietly took a breath and opened her mouth to bite the apple. Seeing Qin Yue approaching, she was so scared that she quickly closed her eyes, and her heart kept beating. Throughout the entire process, Janran did not dare to open her eyes to look at Qin Yue. She also did not know what kind of expression he had. Feeling that the apples were getting less and less, Janran's heart also jumped even faster. Suddenly, Janran's lips felt a warm touch. That was Qin Yue's lips sticking to hers. Ah! The person beside her clapped and screamed. Janran was shocked, as if she had been electrocuted, and took a big step back. Her face was as red as a red apple that they had just eaten. At this moment, the host announced, Blue team, yellow team, green team's challenge has been completed. Red team has lost. Red team had lost. Janran and Qin Yue had to accept the punishment of being drenched in ice water. However, the one who had to accept the punishment was the aloof CEO. No one had the courage to go up and pour cold water on them. If that was really the case, it would really dampen everyone's spirits. At the crucial moment, another special assistant of CEO Liu Yong stood up and said, Then let me offend Boss Qin. This time, everyone applauded and cheered. Liu Yong raised the bucket to avoid Janran, and Qin Yue also pulled his coat to protect Janran in his arms. In the end, Qin Yue's entire body was almost drenched, and Janran was not drenched in ice water at all. Janran looked at Qin Yue, who was completely drenched. She was a little worried that Qin Yue would catch a cold, but she could not show it in front of everyone. She only looked at him worriedly. Qin Yue could see her worry. He took the towel from the staff and wiped his head. He leaned closer to Janran and whispered, Don't worry, I'm fine. He used the towel to casually wipe his head twice and then smiled at the crowd. You guys play? I'll go change. Qin Yue protected Janran because of the gentlemanly behavior of a man to a woman. Usually, men would protect a woman like this, but in the eyes of people with ulterior motives, it completely changed. Ma Donna from the sales department stared at Janran. Her hands, which were hanging by her side, were clenched into fists. She wished she could pinch Janran to death. She had worked so hard to dress up for so long. Not only did she not get Qin Yue's attention, she also did not get Qin Yue's attention. With just one look, this woman with the surname John became the center of attention. In the public relations department, no one dared to say that they were prettier than her. But in the eyes of the male colleagues, Janran from the sales department was better than her. Therefore, Madonna had always regarded Janran as a thorn in her eyes. She wished that she could chase Janran out of the company. After Qin Yue left, Madonna jumped out and said, Janran, seeing how red your face was just now, will you be interested in Boss Qin? Janran coldly glanced at Madonna. Xu Wuyi stood out and said, Boss Qin asked me to send his married email in the company because I don't want to cause bad remarks to cause his wife to misunderstand. Please don't discuss Boss Qin's private life behind his back in the future. Madonna relied on her cousin being the manager of the public relations department and always felt that she was better than others. Now that she was taught a lesson by Xu Wuyi, she did not dare to refute a single word. She could only silently add this hatred onto Janran. After Qin Yue left, he did not appear again. Janran was somewhat worried about him. After playing a few more games, she found a quiet place to send a WeChat message to Qin Yue. Remember to take a hot shower. Don't catch a cold. Some people really can't change their nature. She doesn't hook up with men for a day. She feels uncomfortable all over. At this time, there was no one else around. Madonna's words were direct and vulgar. Janran usually did not pay attention to Madonna because she looked down on this person from the bottom of her heart, but it also proved that she was willing to be bullied by others. Janran put her phone in her pocket and got up to walk towards Madonna. Madonna was frightened by the cold aura that was emitted from Janran's body and timidly took 2 steps back. What do you want to do? Janran pressed forward step by step until Madonna was stuck in the corner. She reached out her hand to grab her chin and said with a cold gaze, Don't have your teeth fully grown yet, and you are like a mad dog biting people, Madonna said sarcastically. Ha, even if I am a mad dog, I am still a mad dog. Better than a shameless woman like you. Look at all the shameless things you've done in the past. You want to climb onto Boss Qin's bed? Dream on. Janran sneered, I heard that you were dumped by your boyfriend last month and even cried so hard. Now you want to get on CEO's bed again. You really want face. Madonna angrily said, I was dumped. It has nothing to do with you. Jinran smiled and said, "Then what kind of woman do I have to do with you? Madana, you are not the only one who knows how to attack people. Don't use a few hundred years ago as a weapon. No matter how ugly other people's scars are, it is not up to you to show off." Madana said arrogantly, "Humph, you still have the nerve to bring up those things. Do you believe that I won't tell you everything and let everyone in the company see who you really are?" "She's my person." A cold voice sounded, and Jianran and Madana's bodies trembled. Jianran did not expect that Qingyue would appear here, and her heart was somewhat nervous. If Qingyue saw her like this, how would he look at her? Madana was so scared that her face turned pale. "Boss Qin, this matter is not like what you see." Jianran, Qingyue did not even look at Madana and coldly spat out a word. "Scram." Madana's face turned red and white. She still wanted to bite the bullet and explain, but she was scared by Qingyue's cold appearance and was unable to speak. She gritted her teeth, stomped her foot, and ran away, feeling wronged. Qingyue walked towards Jianran and stared at her. Jianran was a little nervous when he looked at her. She opened her mouth and wanted to explain what happened just now, but Qingyue used his sexy voice before she opened her mouth and said, "I know you are not the one stirring up trouble." Jianran raised her head to look at him and pursed her lips. "Then what if I am really the one stirring things up, and I am the one bullying her?" Chapter 14. With the president's support, Qinyu did not even think and said, "In the innovation technology, your backer is me. Only you can bully others. How can I let others bully you?" "Thank you," Jianran said softly. She wanted to thank him for not asking anything, but standing behind her so confidently to support her. "What are you thanking me for?" Qinyu raised his eyebrows and said, "Isn't the relationship between husband and wife mutual trust and mutual help?" Jianran raised her eyebrows and smiled. This feeling of being trusted and silently supported by him was really good. It made her feel a trace of warmth in these cold days of shivering autumn wind. Seeing Jianran smile, Qinyu said again, "How about you accompany me to walk around?" Jianran did not want to go back to participate in any activities, but she was worried that others would see her. She did not know whether to agree or not. Qinyu did not give her time to think. He held Jianran's hand and said, "Follow me." Jianran's hand was very cold. Even though it was not very cold in autumn, however, her hands were not warm at all. She was suddenly held in Qinyu's warm hands. His heat was transmitted to her little by little. She let him hold her hand just like that. After a long time, Jianran heard Qinyu say in a low voice, "In the future when you encounter these things, come and find me." His words made Jianran stop in her tracks. She raised her head to look at him, pursed her lips, and carefully asked, "Qinyu, could it be that you are not curious about what kind of person I was in the past?" Qinyu withdrew his hand. Jianran felt sad. Just as she was about to say something, that pair of thick hands landed on her back and gently pulled her into his embrace. She raised her head and looked at him in surprise. She only heard him say, "Jianran, your past has nothing to do with me. I only care about your future." She leaned against Qinyu's firm chest, listened to his steady heartbeat, and heard his words. For some reason, Jianran's eyes suddenly became moist. She rubbed against his chest like a kitten. Qinyu's body froze and he used more strength to hold Jianran's arm. After a long time, Jianran looked up from his arms. He interrupted her. "I will take you to a place." Jianran nodded and let him hold her hand as they continued to walk forward. As they walked, a sea of colorful rose flowers appeared on the left side of the green grass. The rose flowers were luxuriant and fragrant. The flowers were in various shapes and colors. Jianran had seen the roses bloom before, but she had never seen such a large area. It was almost impossible to see the end of it. "So beautiful. I really want to stay here for 10 days to half a month." Jianran kept praising and wished that she could dive into the sea of flowers and never come out again. Qinyu looked at her, his sexy lips slightly raised. The entire Baihai Manor was his property. Not to mention living for 10 days to half a month, she would have no problem living for the rest of her life. Jianran asked, "Didn't the book say that the rose flowers only bloomed in the early summer? How can it bloom in autumn?" Qinyu said, "The ancient people never thought that a plane could fly into the sky. You're right. Now that science is so advanced, I don't think it's strange anymore." Jianran smiled. "Can I walk in and take a look?" Qinyu nodded. Jianran smiled at him. Jianran was wearing a white shirt and jeans today. She was wearing a white sweater with a little bear embroidered on it. Her jet black hair was casually tied into a ponytail. She was dressed naturally. She looked like a 17 or 18-year-old little girl and was very different from the solemn image she usually wore when she worked at work. Qinyu saw Jianran, full of energy, running around like a bee in the sea of flowers. He didn't know what kind of mentality she had, but Qinyu took out his phone and chose the best angle. For the first time, he took a picture of her. Suddenly, a ringtone broke the silence. Jianran smiled apologetically at Qinyu before answering. "Wang Weiming, what's the matter?" Qinyu did not know what the person on the phone said. He heard Jianran say again, "I will go back immediately." After hanging up the phone, Jianran looked at Qinyu and smiled apologetically. "My colleagues are looking for me. I need to go back." Qinyu reached out and took off a leaf from her hair. "I will ask the tour bus to send you back." Janran nodded. Okay. After watching Janran leave, Chinye retracted his gaze and called out softly, Special Assistant Shu? Shu Wei hurriedly walked over. Boss Chin, don't worry. Madana's termination contract has already been prepared. Chinye snorted coldly. Okay. After parting ways with Chinye, Janran returned to the team. Wang Weiming saw her and immediately ran over. Janran, where did you go? I looked for you for a long time and didn't find you. I was so worried. Janran smiled. The scenery here is so good. I walked around. Wang Weiming said, It's dinner time. The company arranged for everyone to have dinner in Nuanshan Pavilion. Let's go in quickly. Janran nodded and walked away. She did not notice that there was a pool of water on the floor tiles under her feet. She slipped and fell backwards. Wang Weiming reacted quickly and supported her. Janran politely pushed him away and took 2 steps back to increase the distance between them. She politely said, Thank you. Wang Weiming's hand fell empty. He said sadly, Let's go. Qinyue and Shu Wei, who just came in, happened to see this scene. Shu Wei said faintly, Looks like Janran is quite popular. Qinyue looked at Shu Wei gloomily, and Shu Wei said innocently, Do you want to write Wang Weiming's termination contract? No need. Qinyue coldly said and turned around to leave. Janran only went back at 8 o'clock in the evening. When she went back, Qinyue was still busy in the study. All the employees in the company were playing, except for CEO, who was still busy with work. No wonder he was able to climb to such a high position at such a young age. Qinyue put down the work in his hands and raised his head. He looked at her. You drank. Janran nodded with a red face. I drank a little. It was more than a little. If it wasn't for the fact that she often ate with customers for the past 3 years and had a good alcohol tolerance, she would have been drunk long ago. Qinyue frowned slightly and said, Drinking is harmful to the body, especially for women. Try not to drink as much as you can in the future. Yes, you are right. In the future, other than necessary, I'll try to drink as little as possible. Seeing Qinyue frown, Janran stood straight like a child who had done something wrong. Then I will go back to my room first. You should also rest early. After saying that, Janran quickly ran back to her room. She smelled the alcohol on her body. Not to mention Qinyue hated it, she also hated it herself, so she decided to go to the backyard and soak in the hot spring. She was comfortably soaking in the hot spring, and Janran was completely relaxed. She soaked in a pool by herself more than a group of people soaking in a pool together. It felt so much better. Janran sat in the pond and raised her head to look at the sky. Today was the 15th day of the lunar calendar. The bright moon hanging in the sky was bright and round. Chapter 15. A drunk woman. It's said that the night of the full moon is the night of family reunion, but her heart is empty. A person without a home was like a tree without roots, like a kite with a broken string. No matter where she went, her heart would not be at ease. Dad, Mom. Janran gently called the person she had missed for a long time. Her eyes were slightly red. It has been 3 years. Have you thought about me? She was also the biological daughter of her parents. However, when that incident happened back then, they abandoned her and made her fall into a foreign land. No one had thought of her for 3 years. Sometimes, Janran felt as if 3 years had passed in the blink of an eye. At the same time, she felt as if a lifetime had passed. All these years, she deliberately did not pay attention to their news. She was afraid that what she saw would make it even harder for her to walk out of the abyss of pain. However, this didn't mean that she really didn't care about this matter. She shook her head with a bitter smile. In fact, the scar in the depths of her heart was like a tumor that would torture her from time to time. Now, although she married a man who was very outstanding and considerate in every aspect, her drifting heart still could not find a sense of security and a sense of belonging. Perhaps it was because the after effects of the wine were too strong. Soaking and thinking about it, Janran only felt that her brain was getting more and more sleepy. Later on, she lost consciousness and did not know anything. Qinyue finished dealing with all the documents for today and returned to his room. The light in the room was on, but he did not see Janran. He waited for a while, but he still did not see her return. He took out his phone and called her. After the call was connected, her phone rang in the room. Qinyue immediately thought that she must have gone to the hot spring. After drinking wine, she went to the hot spring. What if? He immediately went downstairs to the hot spring in the backyard. When he arrived, he saw Janran dozing off and then dived into the hot spring. Qinyue rushed into the hot spring and scooped Janran up. He was a little angry that she actually fell asleep in the hot spring. If he had not come in time, she would have lost her little life. He had a cold face, but Janran, who was in his arms, did not realize his anger at all. She even instinctively rubbed against the heat source. The water on her head made Qinyue's shirt wet. Qinyue carried Janran back to the room with a sullen face. The problem came again. He could not possibly throw her under the covers in a wet swimsuit. Qinyue carried her into the bathroom and prepared to wash her. When he helped Janran wash the water, Janran unconsciously and softly fell into Qinyue's arms. The feminine figure of a woman, the delicate and smooth skin of a woman all seemed to be silently tempting Qinyue. Qinyue's eyes darkened, and his Adam's apple rolled a few times. He hurriedly swallowed a mouthful of saliva and pretended that he did not see anything. However, Janran's body was not honest at all. She twisted her body and even reached out to hug his thin waist. She leaned her head against his chest and exhaled in satisfaction. Qin Yue was a normal man. If Janran continued like this, he could not guarantee that he could suppress the desire in his body. Therefore, before things got out of hand, he took a deep breath and grabbed a towel by the side to wrap the naked Janran up before carrying her back to the room. Qin Yue stuffed Janran into the bed and took a nightgown for her to put on. Seeing Janran's bright red face, his eyes darkened a little. The male hormones in his body were shouting wildly. Qin Yue took a deep breath again and immediately went to the bathroom to take a cold shower. After taking the cold shower, Qin Yue returned to the room. Janran had already kicked the blanket off the bed and was lying on the bed in a large shape. He and Janran had been married for almost a month. They slept together when he was not away for business. Janran was obedient every night. Now that she drank some wine, she revealed her true colors. He walked over and picked up the blanket and covered her again. Janran suddenly turned over and kicked the blanket to the side. Jianbei City was located in the south. Although the weather was not very cold, this was the seaside. The wind was strong at night, and if she continued to cause trouble like this, she would definitely catch a cold. Qin Yue shook his head. He could only lie down on his own and hug the dishonest Jianran. He then pulled up the blanket to cover her. Jianran instinctively moved closer to the heat source. She threw herself into Qin Yue's arms and rubbed against him a few times. Finally, she became more obedient. When Jianran woke up, the sky was already bright. When she opened her eyes, she instinctively looked towards the window. Unexpectedly, she did not see Qin Yue this time. During this period of time, whenever she opened her eyes, she could see Qin Yue sitting by the window reading newspapers. Jianran was not used to not seeing him today. She turned over and picked up the phone. When she saw that the phone had been adjusted to flight mode, the time displayed was 12:23. In other words, she slept until noon and missed out on the department's expansion activities in the morning. Jianran sat up abruptly and jumped off the bed with a bang. She hurriedly rushed to the bathroom. However, just as she took a step, Jianran's movements stopped. Her memory was still the time when she was bathing in the hot spring last night. At this time, she was wearing a sleeping gown. Her sleeping gown was so empty that she did not wear anything. In other words, when she was sleeping in the hot spring last night, it was Qin Yue who carried her back to her room and helped her change clothes. Janran quickly pulled open her collar to take a look. When she saw that her body was fine, she could not help but sigh in relief. However, before she finished exhaling, she remembered that she had been seen by Qin Yue without knowing anything. Her entire body was not good. She threw her head back onto the bed and was embarrassed. Ah, what's the matter? Qin Yue's low and sexy voice sounded in the room, scaring Janran's body and making her even more unhappy. Janran quietly looked up and saw Qin Yue sitting on the sofa in the other corner of the room. He held a folder in his hand and was looking at her. It turned out that he had always been in the room, but he did not make a sound. Then, those childish actions of hers just now were seen by him. Janran suddenly wanted to hide in a crack on the ground. Seeing that she did not respond, Qin Yue put down the documents and walked over. He asked again, "Are you feeling unwell somewhere?" "I'm fine." Janran picked up the pillow and covered herself with it. She really did not have the face to face him. Qin Yue had seen what she just did. He said without batting an eyelid, "Get up and pack up. After dinner, come back with me." Janran said softly, "I have to go to the department in the afternoon." Qin Yue said, "I asked Special Assistant Xu to apply for leave for you." Janran was speechless. The car this time was not the Land Rover that Qin Yue drove at work, but a silver-gray car driven by the driver. The car plate number was A1688, and the logo on the steering wheel was even more shocking. Because it used to be. Because there was once someone who liked to research cars by her side, Janran also knew a lot about this area. She knew that this was a Bentley Mushao model, and it was worth millions.